Hey everyone, so the early kit translations for both Chasca and Ororon were just recently released, and I happen to still be awake, so I just kind of wanted to talk about my first impressions just going through it. This video will definitely be very different than most videos that I usually do. Most videos I do are typically edited and I script them, so I kind of know what I'm talking about and make sure all the information is placed. However, this time I think I'm just going to ramble, talk about what I see and what I read from just the early kit translations and just go from there. I do want to emphasize that because these are very early kit translations, there's probably a lot of things that are just missing. Maybe my interpretations of it are wrong, and there are pretty much no numbers. So I will plan to make a more complete analysis of both of these characters when more information is released. However, again, I just wanted to give my first impressions about what we do know so far, just from the initial information that's being released right now. So again, this video won't be edited that much, and I'll probably be rambling a lot. So I do apologize if this video is not up to your liking, but I kind of just want to put it out there because since I'm still awake and, you know, new kits are pretty exciting for me. So let's get into Chasca. Chasca is a pretty interesting character and a little bit complicated just based on the translations we have, which I'll kind of explain as we go on. So first, let's talk about her signature weapon. It's just crit damage, attack, and if she triggers swirl, she gets attack %. And if there are 1 to 2 characters on the team with different element types, then she gains charged attack damage and elemental burst damage. So just from the weapon, we kind of see what kind of damage dealer she is. I will say that early rumors of Chasca did suggest that she was a main DPS, 5-star bow user, and it did suggest charged attack damage. So yeah, charged attack damage is right here. So the interesting thing here is that you need 2 different elements, and we'll see from the kit that yes, this character, similar to Xilonen, where Xilonen also requires like 2 pyro, hydro, electro, or cryo units, this character also requires something similar in their teams. So I did read through this already, but I will kind of try to explain how I interpret this initial translation of Chasca's kit. So first, normal attack, don't worry about it, it's not relevant. Next is her skill, which is going to be the most important part of her kit. Again, she is a 5-star natlan character, and natlan characters use Night Soul's blessing, and that's pretty much the same thing going on here. Now, I will go over this translation first. However, I do suspect that this translation is actually incorrect and there's stuff missing. So let's just go over this first. Again, deals AoE animal damage, enters Night Soul's blessing with 80 Night Soul energy. Obviously, while she's in this enhanced state, she consumes Night Soul energy, or Night Soul points. Pretty typical. And the interesting thing is that Chasca is basically Wander. When she uses her skill and enters Night Soul's blessing, she goes in the air. Now, what kind of makes it feel like a little bit of power creep is that she gains resistance to interruption and Wander doesn't. It's like, what? Like, why couldn't Wander also have this? So a little bit better than Wander in this case. The interesting thing here is that when she's in Night Soul's blessing, aside from Wander, usually like normal attack and charge attack, right? Kind of similar with Chasca's case, but it seems like it works a little bit different. So when she's in Night Soul's blessing, you can then hold or just normal attack. So when you normal attack, it just deals some damage, but you actually won't normal attack. You want to do the hold here. And according to this, it says enters aiming mode, loads the magazine, and targets a certain amount of characters. So she has like 6 bullets or bolts. So I think how I imagine it, of course we don't have animations yet, but how I imagine it is, imagine Nahida when you hold her skill and she's like shooting her camera, and then you can like mark enemies and it instantly hits them. To me, this is how it feels like Chasca's skill works, where you hold her charged attack. This is technically her charged attack, but I don't think it is going to be like even though she is a bow user, I don't think she's going to be like a charged attack bow user. I think it's going to be holding her skill and kind of shooting or targeting enemies like Nahida, because it fires up to 6 bolts and it seems like you just aim by itself. So hopefully she is not like a charged attack bow carry. So again, she just marks up the 6 enemies and deals damage to them. Now, according to this translation, while she is doing this hold elemental skill damage, if there are 1, 2, 3 power, hydro, cryo, electro characters on the team, then there is a chance to trigger this conversion where she converts one of her bolts into an element. Now here's where I'll stop explaining this translation, because this is what doesn't make sense to me. So let's just say you do have 3 Pyro, Hydro, Cryo, Electro characters on your team. So you have, let's just say you have Pyro, Hydro, Cryo, and Chasca. So yes, you have a 100% chance to trigger the spiritual conversion, converting one of the 6 bolts here into a bolt of that element. But if you have 3 different elements and you convert one of them, then how does the game choose which one it converts to? There's something that just doesn't make sense, and it makes it feel like this translation is missing a lot. And I was pretty confused about this when I was first reading it. However, I did find a message from a Discord user, Tracer, that claims that the translation that we just read was extremely scuffed, and he presents this translation, which after reading it, it does make a bit more sense. So I will kind of explain Chasca's kit, not from that translation that you might see and that you'll see spread around, but according to what is written here. So according to this translation, the skill is kind of the same, where you use her skill, Chasca floats up in the air, and then she can do like normal attacks, which you probably won't use, but a charged attack, but not really a charged attack, where she holds and targets up to 6 enemies. Now here's the thing that makes more sense. So Chasca wants to have different element characters on her team. Let's just say, again, she has a Pyro, Hydro, and a Cryo unit on her team. So you have 3 different elements. Now according to this translation, 3 of those bullets will be converted to those elements. Now that makes more sense, right? It's kind of the same thing as Shilonen's mechanic, right? In that team I just explained, 4th bullet maybe will be the Pyro, 5th bullet would be the Hydro, and 6th bullet would be the Cryo. There we go, that makes more sense, right? Now if you have like Pyro, Hydro, Hydro, then it's probably going to be the same thing, right? 4th bullet Pyro, 5th bullet Hydro, 6th bullet Hydro again. It's going to work the same way as Shilonen's mechanic. Now the interesting thing here is that these bullets will deal damage of that element, which isn't really explicitly said in the previous translation. So according to this translation, Chasca is dealing, let's just say, Pyro damage and Hydro damage, right? Now if we add on to our A1 passive, which had that extra chance of converting another bullet, we can see that, oh, it has a chance to convert the 3rd bullet. So she has 4 bullets out of 6 that actually deal damage that is not anemo. So that's what makes Chasca as a main DPS pretty interesting, where it seems like you won't actually build anemo damage bonus goblet, because she's not doing anemo damage, she's doing just random element damage based on your team. So probably attack percent goblet here, right? And if we just read the burst was the same from the previous translation, but with this newer translation, it kind of makes more sense with the skill. So her burst is just deal AoE anemo damage and fire 6 bolts, and 2 of those bolts will be converted based on the elements on your team. So again, if you have Pyro, Hydro, and Hydro, then you'll have 2 Pyro bolts and 4 Hydro bolts with the burst. Now let's just say you have, I don't know, a Pyro, a Hydro, and a Geo character with Chasca, right? Then you'll get 2 Pyro bolts, 2 Hydro bolts, and then 2 bolts that are just anemo. And that would probably work the same way with the skill, right? If you don't have a 3rd character of another element, then it will just stay anemo. Whether or not that's good or bad, it really depends on the numbers of the bullets. Like, let's just say the anemo bullet deals less damage than an elemental bullet. Then obviously you will want to put different element characters on her team, right? But again, we don't know any numbers, so again, we just have to wait and see. Her A4 passive is when you trigger Night Soul Burst, she fires another bullet that has a different element damage. So you can see that Chasca as a main DPS, even though she is anemo main DPS, which kind of competes with the likes of Xiao and Wander. Xiao and Wander deal anemo damage. She deals different elements of damage, which is kind of fun. Constellations are also provided, a pretty good summary of the translations here. So with C1, you convert the 2nd bullet. So you convert 5 out of the 6 bullets with C1, and the A1 passive is upgraded. So the A1 passive is you have a 100% chance to convert the 3rd bullet if you have 3 teammates that are Pyro, Hydro, Electro, or Cryo, right? And assuming that you want to convert them, then you probably want 3 different element teammates, right? Now with C1, you don't need 3, you only need 2, so that kind of decreases her elemental restriction of team building, and you can kind of add in a different support if you want, like a Geo support. And this is where, like, for example, you could use someone like Shilonen and you won't have the downside of only having 66% chance to convert the 3rd bullet. I think that even if it is 66% chance, just having Shilonen as the last slot still could be helpful, right? And I think people saw the trailer, Chasca, Shilonen seems to be a pairing, and I think even at C0 it still could be useful, but definitely at C1. C1 is definitely confirming that yes, they want Shilonen to be the last slot. C2, once per charge attack, deal 400% of the element of the first, so just extra damage. C3, just skill plus 3, cool. C4, 9 flat energy, once per Q, deal, okay, just extra damage. C5 is burst plus 3, cool. C6, when the 3rd, okay, when the 3rd burst is converted, next charge attack instantly charges, gains 120 crit damage. So, 120 crit damage, pretty cool. And she gets an insta charge it or insta hold, I guess, right? So just extra damage. Of course, C1 is definitely the one that they're trying to bait you with, because you only need 2 elements instead of 3 elements. There's also the exploration passives. Seems like you can hold her skill to plunge but also hover, so she has some hovering abilities with exploration and increased gliding move speed, so I guess that's pretty cool. Just some initial teams that I'm thinking of. I think Farina Bennett will probably just be the best combo with Chasca. It's inevitable, but I don't see it not being the best combo. You can't, unfortunately, this character I don't think we'll be able to use characters like Xingqiu and Yolan, so like that rely on normal attack for coordinated attacks, which does limit some of our supports, but I guess you have to think of off-field supports like maybe Fischl. Yeah, that's Chasca. Again, we don't have numbers, so we can't say, oh, is she going to be good, right? She does seem to play similar to Wanderer in a way, because you scale, you hover, and then you do some attacks, right? Of course, Wanderer does have just animo damage and is reliant on Farazan, while Chasca isn't and has some quality of life like resistance to interruption, so I wouldn't be surprised if Chasca is just a better version of Wanderer. Alright, next we have Ororon. Now, I will say that there is a lot of information I feel like that's missing about Ororon right now, but I think from the information we have a general idea of what teams he's supposed to be in, at least. Mechanics wise, we kind of know a little bit, but also I feel like there is a lot of stuff missing, and it does look like his kit fits a 4-star. Interesting thing here is that he seems to be an electro charge support, so let's just go over it really quickly. So E bounces between enemies 3 times for lightning elemental damage, so imagine is similar to Baiju's E, where it bounces around except without the healing. Q summons an I for range damage and taunt enemies and emit sound waves for lightning damage, so I assume just places a field and deals periodic electro damage. Talent 1, this is where it gets a little bit interesting. So when a character on fields deals electro or hydro damage while the E lasts, so I guess this is supposed to last longer, he gains Night Soul points. Now this is where I meant that we have missing information, because usually skill is, Night Soul's blessing, Night Soul points, right? It doesn't even say that. It doesn't even have any mobility built in, which is also weird because all natlan characters seem to have mobility built within their Night Soul's blessing. So again, who knows? When there's electro or hydro damage, he gains Night Soul's points. So he's going to be the second character that gains Night Soul points, with Kinich being the first. When a character takes, okay, this one says electro sensory, I'm going to assume electro charge damage, or your character deals Night Spirit damage, so I guess a natlan character. Ororon will do a 130% multiplier range lightning damage if he has at least 10 Night Soul points. So just looking from this talent and just from E and Q, you can see that he pretty much just does damage and just does coordinated attacks. And with this sensory damage, which is pretty much electro charge damage if they have electro and water damage as E last, you'll primarily want to have some electro charge teams with Ororon. And with talent 2, he has some supportive capabilities. So when his E hits an enemy, it restores 3 elemental energy to the character on field, and when that character deals electro or hydro damage, they restore 3 energy to Ororon if he's off field. So again, just from looking at this, even though we don't have numbers or anything, and it feels like that this kit is a bit missing, we can see that Ororon appears to be a electro charge support, pretty much just a sub DPS, as he doesn't have that many buffing capabilities. It's just energy recharge a little bit, but it's mostly just damage. And he's going to be off field because you will want to have either an electro or a hydro character on field driving the electro charge reaction. Constellations are important, so let's go over those as a 4-star. So C1 increases the skills bounce by 2, so it hits 2 more times, and increases the multiplier of manifestation super sense by 60% when it hits. Manifestation super sense. Now again, a lot of these names are translated, so it doesn't really match up. I'm assuming this is the deals 130% multiplier range damage when this happens, when there's electro charge damage, and he has 10 Night Soul points at least, right? So increased multiplier 60%, again leaning toward the sub DPS role. C2, when he Qs, he gains more electro damage and even more electro damage. So yes, C2 just gives Ororon more electro damage on his burst. C3 increases burst by 3, cool. C4, okay, it says rotates his burst 25% faster. I'm gonna assume it's not rotates, but like it hits 25% faster, so he gets more hits, right? C5 skill +3, that's cool. And C6 boosts the attack power of characters on field by 10% up to a maximum of 3 levels. So with his C6, he is able to give the party 30% attack. So this is his other way of giving an actual buff to the party. And that's pretty much everything that we know from Ororon. Again, stuff is missing definitely, but from what we can tell, he is a primarily off-field sub DPS that works for electrocharge teams. Now, I don't think it's going to be an anemo driver like Sucrose because you want the on-field to deal electro or hydro damage, but it could be like you could use Kazuha as an anemo support still, but ideally you have an electro or a hydro on-fielder driving the reaction. He could be used in Nebulet Electrocharge, Ayato Electrocharge, stuff like that, maybe even Yai Electrocharged. Again, we don't know any numbers, but those are some of the team comps that I am thinking of right now. I am a bit concerned about this character because he does deal, just damage, and again, it really depends on how much damage he deals, which depends on the multipliers, and we don't know the multipliers yet. However, he doesn't have that many buffs, and buffs are pretty important, so if you just deal damage mostly and don't really provide that many buffs, you are kind of limited, but again, we shall see. So that is everything that we currently know about Chasca and Ororon from the initial translation of their kits. Now again, I do want to emphasize that this is just the initial translation. We do not have numbers at all, so we can't really judge how strong or what these characters really do, but I do want to just give my first impressions about these characters because generally, even though these are just initial translations, they are typically still relatively accurate about what the character kits actually are. So even without numbers, just explaining these initial translations can give you a general idea of what these characters are supposed to do. But again, I do want to emphasize that stuff is missing, just a translation, we don't have numbers. So I will make a dedicated video for both Chasca and Ororon in a couple days when more information is released. And those videos will be more detailed, it won't be me rambling, it will be scripted. So you'll know pretty much all the necessary details that you'll need to know from their initial beta kits. So make sure you subscribe for the channel to get notifications of whenever those videos come out. So again, hopefully you enjoyed this somewhat different kind of style video. Again, I just wanted to give my first reactions, first impressions of these initial translated kits. Hopefully I didn't ramble too much, and hopefully I kind of explained it a little bit better just through my interpretation so you can get a better understanding. Hopefully you're not even more confused. So yeah, I hope you are all excited about Chasca and Ororon.